Exactly. And you mentioned Saddam Hussein, and I just wanted to add to that because what that reminded me about is the Iraq-Iran war. At that point in time, Saddam Hussein was not a monster to fight that the United States had to fight. It was an ally against Iran. And there are multiple reports showing that Saddam Hussein did receive chemical weapons from Western allies to use in the war against Iran when Iraq invaded Iran. And so at that point, he was an ally, but then conveniently, when it was time to turn the tables, he became, and which he was. I'm not saying that he was not, but it's just a very convenient way to manipulate public opinion and to sort of use these figures as best as the United States foreign policy can to achieve their foreign policy agenda. And then, of course, at one point he was a convenient ally, and then, of course, he had, which he did not, weapons of mass destruction, and the United States had to invade Iraq to help the world get rid of Saddam Hussein. So it's very interesting how flexible U.S. foreign policy is, and how flexible military spending is when it comes to serving the agenda of the military industrial complex and those who benefit from it.
Yes, and well, keep in mind also Osama bin Laden had been armed and funded by the United States to fight the Soviets when the Soviets
Right.
invaded
Yep.
Afghanistan
Yep.
in the 70s, and then that came back to be a problem for us. I mean, this is a timeless story that the United
Yeah.
States keeps running into. So there's nothing new there as at all, and we'll just who knows what problems will come in the future from alleged allies in, say, Ukraine. Who knows what that might lead to 10 years down the road? All those weapons that were poured into that country and are unaccounted for. Who knows where that stuff's ending up? And then, of course, the United States insists on getting involved in the Middle East, which is just a recipe for continued bad blood with many parts of the world and continues to isolate the United States from the rest of the world diplomatically and economically as well. And that goes back to just comments I made earlier about how the US never actually disengages anywhere, right? They're talking about, oh, we need the pivot to Asia. We need the real threat is China. Let's pivot to Asia. All that ends up meaning is they spend more in Asia, or they talk more about the need for more US intervention in Asia, but they never disengage from the Middle East or Ukraine or other places. They in fact just increase spending there, or they at least keep it steady. And another thing that the administration does is, oh, we're getting back to the Monroe Doctrine. We're focused on Latin America now, on the Western Hemisphere. Well, there has been no disengagement anywhere else either. The focus isn't on Latin America at the expense of anywhere else. They've just added that as another place to get involved and spend more money. And all of the talk about Greenland and all of the talk about Venezuela and this decapitation there, which wasn't even a regime change. The ruling party that won with Maduro is still in power. We were
Right.
supposed to believe that they were going to instate free market capitalism there or something, and people were going to become really free. Nothing's changed for the average Venezuelan. The same socialists that were in charge 6 months ago are in charge now in Venezuela. It seems that the only thing that was being freed up was access of some Western firms to oil fields in Venezuela, but no one in the U.S. regime seems to care about anything beyond that. So that was quite the bait and switch and the rug pull for average Venezuelans who are not experiencing any increases in freedom that anyone can point to.
When Americans hear about a $1.5 trillion military budget, they seem to assume that the focus is on defense. But in reality, this has very little to do with defense. The United States is very much focused on offensive posturing in many areas of the world. Just in the past couple of months, as you mentioned, Trump blockaded Venezuela before kidnapping its president. And now the U.S. Armada is in the Persian Gulf, threatening Iran. And on top of that, the United States maintains more than 750 U.S. military bases in roughly 80 foreign countries and territories. Now, by contrast, and some people would say, well, China and Russia probably have just as many, but that's not the case. By contrast, China officially maintains one overseas base, just one, and it's located in Djibouti on the Horn of Africa. And Russia officially has six military bases, just six, in the former Soviet republics, and there are two in Syria, although I think the latter two, I believe, are in sort of flux right now. So the United States has more than 750, which are run at US taxpayers' expense in one way or another. And given surging national debt, increasing deficits, slowing US economy, deteriorating public infrastructure here in the United States, why is the American public so disinterested in demanding that Washington decreases its military presence abroad?
I think they just don't know that much of it. All they see are the little bits that filter down in terms of this. There's a foreign threat here, and we're going to take care of it, keep you safe, and also make foreigners better off. And that seemed to be the narrative for Venezuela, for example. And generally, the people I interacted with, right, normal people who don't follow this stuff all day for a living, they have real jobs where they can't read the newspaper all day. All they were getting, the only information they were getting was that there were narco terrorists coming out of Venezuela that were going to attack the United States in some way. None of the details mattered. And that the US was going to get rid of these bad socialists in Venezuela and then give free market liberalism to the people of Venezuela. And then, so when Maduro gets kidnapped and flown back to the United States, mission accomplished was basically what was said. And the public, which had other things to do, they had to drive their kids to soccer and things like that. They didn't have time to research that. So it worked because they get their headlines in, and all people see is, oh, we got rid of bad guy. This country's better off. And also, we no longer have to worry about narco terrorists. Whereas, of course, if you looked really into the data, there were no narco terrorists blowing up boats off the coast of Venezuela, which is 1,000 miles from the U.S. coast. Tiny little boats that would have had to have refueled multiple times just to get across to the U.S. No threat there. There's been no freedom brought to Venezuela. And it doesn't mean anything. But if you talk about these things and then you announce victory at the end, that's the only message people get. And that's what worked with Greenland too, right? Oh, America needs more control over Greenland so that we can have missile bases there, or so that the Russians can't send their ICBMs over Greenland to land in America. And uh, it turned out, of course, that the United States already had permission and access to have countless bases and an almost limitless number of troops in Greenland. This has been part of the agreement for decades. There's been no change. The U.S. has unilaterally pared down the troops it had in Greenland, but is free to increase it again at will. But for whatever reason, Trump decided the better thing to do, well, for political reasons, I suppose, that would be better to talk about, oh, we're going to take over Greenland and make us safer. So in the end, changes the status quo not at all. The U.S. now is able to put bases in Greenland as it was able to 6 months ago. Nothing changed. But at the end of it all, he announced, oh, I negotiated this great new deal about Greenland. And people believe that because they don't know. They don't know what. I mean, how many people know the history of U.S. policy over Greenland? Like nobody. So that works if you just get in the media enough and you post it on Twitter. And people, I think, function just generally more on fear. So they're thinking, oh, I should be fearful of the Russians nuking us over Greenland, not knowing the reality. They should just be actually much more fearful of the whole concept of nuclear war. Having control of Greenland isn't going to stop the destruction of planet Earth if you have a nuclear war. And we should be afraid of Venezuelans, just like we should be afraid of Saddam Hussein. Slobodan Milosevic is the next Hitler. That was something we were told in the 90s. I mean, there's just no end to it. And nobody has time to get the details. And so the regime really has control of media and the ability to get these messages out. And if you take exception to it, then they just start saying that you're a pacifist and you don't care about freedom, you don't care about defending the United States, and it works over and over again. I would say that one place the American people have grown, however, is they are much less tolerant, I think, of outright invasions into foreign countries. I think we saw the first signs of that during Syria when Obama was talking about, you know what, we need to invade Syria. We need troops on the ground in Syria and we need regime change there. And very few Americans were interested in that at all. Obama was able to put some troops there surreptitiously, right? That was basically a secret because the
Mhm.
American people weren't in favor, and was able to carry out the usual American sneakiness that they do in every country. But there was really no discernible U.S. support for invading a country in the style of Iraq or Afghanistan. So I think Americans have grown weary of this whole. We need to recruit 100,000 new Americans to send to a foreign country, and they can occupy it for 10 or 20 years, and we'll reform that place, and then we'll all come back. It'll all be a glorious success. To claim that after what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq, Iraq's now actually more of an ally with Iran than ever after the regime change there. So that was clearly a failure, even from the US's own standards. I'm hopeful that the U.S. is no longer that Americans are no longer interested in these full scale occupations and invasions. But that doesn't mean that they're going to do anything to oppose these little short things that are just a couple of weeks in the news cycle and then they go away and the politicians claim victory. And we need to spend another $1 trillion while we're at it to keep you safe. I think that does still work. I think maybe they just can't do as much as they would like to.